Well, good evening. Hello, hello, hello. I am super excited to be with you all on tonight. I know it's been a minute. We pressed pause for just a moment. As you can see, we've changed some things around. We changed the intro. We've got some great guests that are going to be coming up leading into the end of this month and beginning of next month. And just, oh my gosh, we're super excited. But we're most excited about the fact that you are here with us, whether you're tuning in live or you're watching the replay. We welcome you. I am Chelsealya Cookie Payne, founder of Payne and Glory Incorporated. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization located right here in the metropolitan Atlanta area. We stand upon three platforms that are our main foundation that keeps us strengthened and that allows us to be the organization and the ministry that we are. And when I say ministry, we're not a church, but what we do is a form of ministry. And what those three platforms are is we started off on the platform and we continue to stand upon the platform of domestic violence awareness and prevention. And we expanded to the reach to women's health and wellness. And in 2014, we launched what we're in right now, which is Payne in the Pews, Mental Health and Ministry. It is not specific to women. It's not a women's thing. It's not just for men. It's not for families. It's for everyone, because listen, everyone that has a brain has mental health. And so we want to make sure that we bring awareness and understanding and erase the stigma that is associated with mental health and bridge the gap between mental health and the faith communities, knowing that you can indeed have faith and a prayer life. You can have a therapist and have to take medication, just as you would with any other physical malady, because having our faith, having a belief in God, and knowing that there is yet something that we need help with, whether it is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. We know that there is help for us. We have a God that we depend upon, and He has given us resources and people that are there for us. And so we have here Payne in the Pews, Mental Health and Ministry. And we are back. Yes, we had been on a short break. And now we're back and we're glad about it. Listen, we took a short break because it was necessary. It's almost as if you will allow the analogy, putting new wine in the old wineskins, doing the same thing, trying to put the same kind of thing into what was already past. So, we started doing Payne in the Pews, Mental Health and Ministry, the broadcast. We started doing the broadcast before the pandemic hit. So at the beginning, we started it at the beginning of the pandemic. We started in April 2020. And so as the pandemic began to go on, as life began to go on, and things and life began to change, and what we knew to be the norm changed, we had to realize that we had to shift with that change. And we took a step back and did some reevaluating. And not that the mission has changed, that we've had some amazing, and I do mean amazing, guest speakers that have come on, and we are going to continue that trend. We're going to continue that. We're going to continue to make sure that we bring quality people before you, people who are gifted and talented in the areas of mental health and ministry. And so I'm excited about what is coming. I'm excited about the collaborations that God has allowed to take place. This is just awesome. I'm excited. And I hope you are too. So to kick off us getting relaunched, well, relaunched isn't quite the right word I would use, but to kick off us coming back and getting hitting the restart button, if you will, I thought it would be great if I were to get us started myself. I started Payne and the Pews. Now, Payne and Glory, the nonprofit organization, has been around since 2005. So we've been around for a minute. We're not new on the block. We're not newcomers. And I'm so grateful for the partnerships and the collaborations and the people that we have met throughout the years. It has been phenomenal. But in 2014, we launched this initiative, Payne and the Pews Mental Health and Ministry. In 2020 is when I was approached, well, the end of 2019, I was approached actually to be a part of an anthology, to be a co-author in a book with some amazing authors, to write a part, just a snippet of my story, right? And it was a bit daunting. I had written, short stories, and nothing that had been put out. Certainly nothing that had been on Amazon. Certainly nothing had made a bestsellers list. Certainly nothing that had gone all over the country. Certainly nothing like that. And it was, when I tell you that this was an opportunity that has been such a blessing, and it definitely has. So I was given the opportunity to write, as I said, just a snippet of my experience. The interesting part is, for me, I would have never, pre-2014, I would have never said out loud what my thorn in my flesh was, so to speak, what my issue was. I would have never said out loud to people who were not close to me, to people who were not a part of my family, my closest friends. I would have never said what I was dealing with, because for years, and still now it's a little uncomfortable, but for years, it was just so daunting, and it was so embarrassing, and it was so overwhelming to share that vulnerable space with someone else. Because, to be honest with you, a lot of people just don't understand. You try to articulate it, and it just seems like people just don't understand or trivialize what you're dealing with. And I found that to be more so in the church, unfortunately. So this is something that I've been dealing with all of my life, as a little child up to the adult that I am now. So it's not something that it is new. It's not something that, it just happened. It's not something that came about, like for many people, that came about during the pandemic. This is something that I've dealt with my entire life. So I had the opportunity to be a part of this anthology. There's no health without mental health. And when I tell you, the journey to writing it was something. And when our coach was telling us, there are going to be times where it's going to be difficult for you to write, she was right. When she told us as we were writing, just let the pen just write, just type it, just write it however it comes to you. You may have a burst here and you just want to write it out, do it. And it did happen. She said that there may be some times where you'll be writing and you'll be in tears. She was right. So as she coached us along this journey of writing, she really gave us insight as to what we were going to be facing, because this wasn't a fictional story. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't something that was based on someone else's story. These are our stories. So you see the authors on the back, all of us here, and there I am. Yay, there I am. You see us, you see the pictures of us here, but you really get to see us in here, right? You get to see us in these pages. And even when it was released, when it was printed and ready to be distributed and put on Amazon and put out, for the world to see, it was challenging. Now, mind you, I had been having Payne in the Pews Mental Health and Ministry events since 2014. But this was different. Those events would come and go. If you were there, you were there. If you weren't, you weren't. If you happen to see, or hear, or, but these pages live on and on and on and on. And so this was close to my heart. And so I'm not going to read my whole section. I'll leave that for you to do. So if you're interested in getting an autographed copy of it from me, just go to our website, payneandglory.com, and I'll be sure to and just follow the information there, and we'll just place your order there. But I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to give you some excerpts from it. And if time allows, if you have any questions here while we're on Facebook Live, or if you happen to watch the replay and you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Those that are respectful, because we want to make sure that we are respectful, not only of myself, but of others who have been brave enough to share their stories. How about that? So the title of my particular chapter is called Breathe. Just breathe. Breathe. Just breathe. And so I started out with my favorite scripture. It is the foundational scripture, actually, of Payne and Glory, but it absolutely is my favorite scripture. Is Romans 8:18, and it says, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." And that again is Romans 8:18. That is a scripture that is near and dear to me. So I'm literally going to give you snippets, and I want you to kind of take yourself from your place of understanding and try to place yourself in my shoes, or not even mine, the shoes of a person who's experiencing what I'm about to read. How about that? And again, it's chapter 3. Breathe. Just breathe. Pounding heartbeat, hands and body trembling uncontrollably, racing thoughts that can't seem to slow down to allow the rational mind to take over, unshakable fear that grips like a bear in the wilderness, all out panic. I've got to get out of here. Wherever here is, wherever here happens to be, Jesus, help me. I can't breathe. I can't make it stop. Breathe. Breathe. This is so embarrassing. What if someone sees me freaking out? No one understands me. Breathe. Breathe. My fingers are tingling, and I feel like I've got to run out of here. Breathe. What I've just described to you is what, for me now, for this is my experience. Others have different, maybe similar, but different experiences. But this is what it feels like for me at the beginning of a panic attack. Since I've been a child, I have suffered from panic attacks and anxiety, panic disorder and anxiety. I did not know what it was until I was in my 20s, until there was actually a diagnosis. I did not know what it was called. I did not know that other people experienced it. I thought that there was just something wrong with me. I didn't see my siblings experiencing it. I just thought something was wrong with me. But trust me when I tell you, there's no health without mental health. So I went to my primary care physician, and that's where I got an actual diagnosis from a primary care physician. It wasn't even a psychologist, psychiatrist, a mental health professional. It was a mental health, my primary care physician. However, that primary care physician I explained here in the book, he actually said some very hurtful things to me, that if you, I don't know, you might not perceive them as hurtful, but they were actually hurtful to me. And I expound on them here in the book a bit. I'm going to read just a little. Like, again, I'm not going to read you the whole chapter. I'm not going to give away all the nuggets, but I want to kind of share with you how people's perceptions and people's lack of knowledge, or even maybe lack of empathy, can really be hurtful. Now, mind you, this is a health provider. He wasn't a mental health provider, but he was my primary care physician. And so I had gone to him, and he had prescribed some medication for me to help me. And again, this is where I found out that there was actually a name for what I was dealing with. I was, again, in my 20s. I dealt with this since I was a child, a little kid. But I finally, we finally got a diagnosis, and he gives a prescription. But here's what he said, and I'm pulling this out of the middle of the paragraph again, so I don't give away too much. I wrote here, but the doctor that I had at the time told me that the pills that he was prescribing for me would help. He then proceeded to tell me in a very dry and very matter-of-fact way that he thought that I had control issues. Wow. Really, Doc? He never mentioned anxiety or panic attacks at that time, at least not that I remembered. But he told me that the medication that he was prescribing would help me with the attacks that I was experiencing. Control issues. You don't really prescribe medication for someone who has control issues. And so it was around that time when I actually got an actual diagnosis, and I began to look into myself, look into what in the world does panic attack mean? What is anxiety? I mean, I was consider myself fairly intelligent, so I knew what in general terms what panic attack means. I knew what in general terms what anxiety meant, but I needed to know what was going on physiologically in me, what was happening. I began to learn about triggers. I began to learn about imbalances. I began to learn about genetics, about how things are genetic. And I began to really get into what was going on in me and how I could help myself. Again, still so very embarrassed by the fact that there was something that was coming over me that had me and gripped me in such a way that it took everything in me to bring myself to the point of breathing. And so you hear people say things like, "What you so scared of?" Insensitive, because it's not just a fear, it's an unnatural fear. And so when people try to, which is fine, when people try to ascribe a scripture to it, that is fine. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but that of power, love, and of sound mind. That is true. But when they try to use it to hurt you or try to make you feel small or try to diminish what you're going through, then that is when the scripture is used as a weapon and not as a healing salve. And I've experienced that. Where scripture, be anxious for nothing. I get that. And I receive that. But when it's said to you in an accusatory tone, as if you don't have faith, God commanded you not to be anxious. Well, okay. Would you say something as insensitive as that to someone who is suffering, who is a cancer patient, or a person who is diagnosed with diabetes, or a person who has heart issues. But it's been said, as long as I'm around, you don't have to be scared. It goes beyond being scared. It is a physiological experience that takes place in the body. And for some people, I just recently spoke to someone whose panic attacks were so different from mine. I've never experienced anything like that, where they would experience syncope, which would mean they would pass out. I've never experienced that, where the person would black out. How scary is that when you don't know if you're going to pass out and harm yourself? But yet there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect of that understanding, because if a person has seizure disorder, there's compassion. But if a person has anxiety or panic disorder, there's accusing. There's accusing that they don't have faith, or that's a spirit. Well, what disease or sickness isn't? By his stripes we are healed, right? But in the book, I go on to share my experiences in church. As I said, I have been dealing with this since I was a child. So there have been church experiences for me that have been hurtful. There have been ministry moments, right? That were less than healing. And I go into it in the book. But I'm certain, because I've talked to too many people, I'm certain that I could stop talking now and allow others to give their experiences, and we could be here until this time next Monday with sharing stories of what their issue or what their mental health challenge has caused them, the embarrassment, the shame, the unwillingness to even get help, because it's hard to go down. It's easier, seemingly. And this stems, what I'm about to say stems from conversations I've had. It's seemingly easier to go to a mental health professional and talk to a stranger than go to the altar and tell the minister or prayer warrior or pastor or whomever is at the altar what you need prayer for. Unfortunately, one of the things that is needed, and I have been a huge advocate for, is having mental health professionals as a part of congregations. Or if you don't have a mental health, a relationship with a mental health professional that can be a part of the congregation, at least have a referral system. Have someone that you can refer them to, because everything that you see is not as it looks. I'll give you an example. I gave this example a couple of weeks ago. I was invited to be a part of a panel discussion just a couple of weeks ago, and it was great, and I loved being with them. And one of the examples I gave is, if someone were to come in here and say, "Rhonda, come here. Rhonda, come here, Rhonda." No one would move, because no one in that room, none of the ladies at that table, no one's name was Rhonda. So I'm not coming out if that's not my name. So if we're at the altar and you're praying for me, know what you're praying and know what to call out, so that the person that you're praying for, number one, doesn't feel this is a quote from someone, so that the person that you're praying for does not feel like the demon, does not feel like a demon. That's important. That is actual quote from someone. Know how to address what you're looking at. If someone comes up and needs prayer for their heart condition, you don't start praying for the feet. You pray for the issue. So I encourage, one of the things I encourage is mental health first aid. I have offered that course quite a few times, and it's been great. It's been great because I love the engagement of people in leadership positions, not just in church. Just people who, the last one we had right before we had to shut everything down, right, the beginning of 2020, we had one where people were coming. Someone came as far as from Tennessee, and there was another person that came from another state. I can't remember. That were their corporate job sent them there, and we did have pastors and elders that were in that last class that we had. But it was great because we have to know, just like we know how to do CPR. If we know how to do CPR, it's important to know how to do mental health first aid. So getting back to the book. So as I said, as I began to, this primary care physician that, prescribed the medication for me and told me that, he really thought that I had control issues. And it prompted me to get an actual diagnosis and to really dig into what this diagnosis meant and what it how to manage it and all that fun stuff, right? The best decision I made, and I talk about it here in the book, was when I changed doctors. I had been that same doctor for a number of years, but the best decision I made for myself was to get out of an environment that, although I was familiar with it because I've been going to that doctor for years, he was actually harming me. He took an oath to do no harm, but he made me feel so inadequate when I went in there. Again, he was not a mental health professional, but when I would go in, he had already diminished me and made me feel so less than, that when I went in there for regular things, regular checkup, blood work, and all that, I didn't even want to go. So one of the best decisions I made was I changed doctors. And let me just read a snippet of this, just a snippet. And again, if you're interested in getting a signed copy or ordering your signed copy from me, then you could go to payneandglory.com and follow the instructions to place your order there. So I go on to write, changing doctors was the best decision that I could have made. She was my primary care physician, but she listened to me. That made a huge difference to me. After some time on the medication, and I state what medication it was, my doctor changed my anxiety meds from that medication that I share on here to a new one. I honestly cannot remember why we made the switch, but we did. And I really don't remember what was the cause. But here's what happened. And it was not a pleasant experience for me. When we switched from the previous medication to the new one, it was not a good experience. And so I go on to explain in the book, what happened. It was, I still remember it as if it happened just yesterday. It was not a good experience. It was, excuse me, it was scary. It was scary. It was scary. And what transpired in the midst of the scariness, because I'd taken this medication and had a reaction, and I go into telling what happened and what happened while at church, because the reaction happened while at church. And I go into talking about in the book what happened. So you got to read the book to find out what happened. But I will say this. I am so glad that my doctor, as I said, the new doctor, she listened to me. She listened to me because when I told her what happened, she immediately took me off of that and made sure that I was good and made sure that we got that out of my system and that we went on to something that was going to be more tailored for me. Because really, medication is trial and error. I don't care what it's for. I don't care if it's for headaches. I don't care if it's for whatever. It's what works for you works for you. I can tell you though that this book came out in April of 2020. In a year where, if we're being honest, for many people who suffer from panic disorder and anxiety, it's one huge trigger. If we're being honest, some of the things that transpired were one huge trigger for many people. But I'm thankful to God that He allowed me to really have, number one, a really strong relationship with Him, and also to have a really, really amazing therapist. Like, she is amazing. She is like walking sunshine. It's like she really gets in and like, okay, is she like literally following me around and knows what's going on? But she's really well trained and well versed in what she does. But I recently, interestingly enough, and I'll share this before we close, and I want to make sure that I encourage you, if you want to get a signed copy of the book, I encourage you to go to payneandglory.com, and I'll be sure to send it out to you, because I really go into telling you what some of the triggers are for me or were for me, what some things that happened to me. I go into explaining what some of the things that has helped me. I go into, and I talk about quite a few things, and I want you to be able to go along the journey with me. But like I said, in 2020, 2021, there are a lot of things that could have and potentially could have been a major trigger for me. But I thank God that, He's seen me through. Now, mind you, it has not always been sunshine and daisies and roses and daffodils, but God is faithful. On this past Thursday, I had a doctor's appointment because I was experiencing some issues that had nothing to do with my mental health. It was to deal with my physical health. And it had been going on for several days, and I said I need to go to see about, just make an appointment with my doctor, see what's going on. Maybe it's nothing, get there. And she tells me I have two options. And those options were, she can see if I can get in to see a specialist that day, or I can go right to the emergency room. Now, I don't know about you, whether you suffer from panic and anxiety like myself or not. Hearing those words, so she didn't give me a third option. Go home and we'll just see how things go. Wasn't an option. Let me write you this prescription and you take this and take two of these and call me in the morning, was not an option. My two options were, we'll see if we can get a specialist to see you today, or you're going to the emergency room. Well, I sat in that room while she left out and tried to get specialists on the phone, her and her staff. I sat in that room and tears began to roll down my face. Did not have a panic attack. I'm telling you this because I'm hoping this will help someone. Although I could have, because that certainly was a trigger. You haven't given me a lot to go on. I know what I'm feeling right now, and I know what you're implying without saying it. I know what you're implying. But I sat there, and when she came back in, she said, I couldn't get a specialist today to see you today, so I need you to go to the emergency room. And she's typing on the laptop. She's typing on the laptop. And she says, "Do you have any questions?" And my mouth could not articulate anything. And so I just shook my head. Of course, she couldn't see me because she had her head turned away looking at the laptop. So when she didn't hear me, she turned to me and she saw, although of course all she could see was my eyes because I had on my glasses and I had on a mask, but she could see, well, I didn't have on glasses. I did not. All she could see was my eyes and the mask. And she grabbed the tissue. And this woman of faith, this doctor, this physician, this woman says, "We trust God. You're going to be all right." And in that moment, if I began, I still was, it still was a moment, but in that moment, I did have a bit of a breathe moment. Imagine if I had had that same care with the primary care doctor I'd had years ago, who told me that you just have control issues. What if he just said, "You'll be okay. Let me refer you to." Imagine how much farther along I would have been in the process. So I did as she instructed. I came home for a moment, gathered my things, and my precious daughter came with me. And we went to the emergency room. In the midst of still, although I hear people saying post-pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic, we went to the emergency room, and it went from a doctor's visit to an ER visit to being admitted. All things that are trigger worthy. But I'm so grateful for a God that hears me, and so grateful for a therapist that gave me tools to use. You can indeed have faith and a therapist. Although I haven't talked to my therapist, she'd already given me tools to use in my little bag of knowledge. And God had already equipped me to be able to have people in place, to have my daughter there with me to kind of be my comic relief and to be my sound of peace. And a doctor who said, "God's got you." And all throughout the evening and all throughout the night, that same doctor sent me text messages saying that she was praying for me. Powerful, powerful. Our words have power. And so when we are in positions in ministry, because although she's a doctor, that is her ministry. When we are in a position of ministry, we have to be careful what we're saying to people. I've heard things like, I've heard several things. I could go on and on, but I encourage people, be cautious of what you say, because you never know what people are dealing with. And if you've been trained, if you've taken the mental health first aid courses, you kind of get a glimpse into knowing what to say and how to handle a situation. And the awesome part about the instructor that I have, because I don't teach it, I just host the training course. The trainer that I have is saved, so she infuses God in the process. It is amazing. It's awesome. And I will be having it again. We just want to make sure that we are doing it in the safest, most feasible way, because your health and safety is what's most important. Sure, it can be done virtually, but it's an 8-hour course. And there's some things that you just really experience being in that class that you might not necessarily get virtually. It's possible. It's possible. So we're working on that. But listen, I go into quite a few things in this book, and not just me. Listen, there are some people in this book that have shared some amazing stories. Their testimonies will help you to understand the importance of having compassion and knowing that there really is no health without mental health. Listen, I am Chelsealya Cookie Payne. I am the founder of Payne and Glory Incorporated, the administrator of this particular group, Payne, this initiative, Payne and the Pews Mental Health and Ministry. I am glad that you joined me. Again, I didn't want to give you too much of the book. I want you to grab it. I want you to read it. I want you to see what stands out for you. I would love to honor your questions. If you have questions that maybe I didn't go over, maybe you have questions, be sure to send them to me. You can inbox them to me, as many people do, or you can put them right here in the comment section, whether you're watching live or watching replay. I'll make sure that I get to them. Always wanting to be respectful of others, because we never know who's going to be helped or hurt because of what's said. So we want to be mindful of that. So listen, have a blessed evening. I look forward to seeing you next week. We will have an amazing special guest on next week, but I wanted to get us started off by having this discussion, because there truly is no health without mental health. I hope that you have an amazing rest of this week. I hope that you take time to take care of you. I hope that you do things that are important to make new memories for you and your family. I hope that you are staying safe. I hope that you are staying safe. I hope that you are staying safe. Continue to be blessed. Continue to pray for one another. And listen, I will see you next Monday.